If I'm being honest, I ignored the warning signs. The first one came in the form of a ding, a bank notification, that popped up while I was knee-deep in back-to-back video calls, balancing spreadsheets like a caffeinated zombie. Something about unusual activity. I barely skimmed it before locking my phone and tossing it on the desk. Stupid. So stupid. Hours later, after my second cup of coffee turned cold and bitter, I finally checked, and I swear to God, I forgot how to breathe. $0. Every account checking, savings, even my so-called rainy day fund was empty. Gone. Drained like someone vacuumed up my entire life savings and left the shell. At first I thought it was some glitch. A bank screw-up. I refreshed. Again. Nope. It got worse when I opened the transaction history. Luxury hotel bookings in places I'd never been. Designer stores I couldn't pronounce. First-class flights. And some fancy seafood place in Chicago that probably served oysters on gold plates. My chest tightened. My fingers started shaking as I scrolled faster, and then it hit me. It was her. I hadn't said her name out loud in years, but in my mind, it rang like a siren. Marilyn, my mother, the same woman I'd gone no contact with after therapy, boundaries, and a decade of chaos. You okay? I flinched. It was my best friend and coworker, Zoe, standing by the cubicle with concern written all over her face. I held up my phone without a word. She stepped in closer and gasped. "Is that your account?" I nodded slowly, heart still pounding. I think it was my mom. Zoe's mouth dropped open. "You still had that old joint account from college, didn't you?" My lips were dry as I nodded again. I never closed it. Thought it was harmless. She hadn't touched it in years. "I have to go," I muttered. "I need to go home." Now, I barely remember the drive back. Just the growing pressure in my chest like I'd swallowed cement. I kept picturing Marilyn's smile, charming to everyone else. Razor sharp behind closed doors. She used to call me dramatic every time I tried to set a boundary. She'd seemed better lately, more grounded. She sent a birthday card last year, first one in forever. I was naive. I let her back in, just a little. And she gutted me. When I got home, her car was gone. Everything inside the house looked normal. A half-eaten banana on the counter. Mail piled near the door. For a moment, I let myself hope I was wrong, until I saw the envelope, plain white, my name in her cursive. I already knew it was bad. "Dear Lex, I didn't want to leave like this, but I needed a fresh start. You'll understand one day. I'm sorry I'm understand." She cleared out every dollar I had and dipped like a thief in the night. I wanted to scream, and I did. One loud, primal, heart-shattering scream that echoed through the house. But there was no one to hear it. Just me, the hollow sound of my own breath, and a lifetime of disappointment. And then my phone rang. Unknown number. I hesitated. "Hello? Hi, is this Alexis Monroe?" "Speaking." "This is Benjamin Reyes, attorney for Mrs. Eleanor Monroe." I froze. "Grandma Ellie, I'm sorry to inform you she passed away last week. She named you as the primary heir. I've been trying to reach you. Everything stopped. My ears were ringing." Grandma Ellie was the only real family I ever had. The one who let me crash at her house in high school when Mom kicked me out. Who covered my first semester of college. Who always told me, "You deserve more, Lex." And now she was gone too? I'll come to your office," I whispered. Benjamin's office felt too expensive. Too heavy. The kind of place where serious things happened. I sat stiffly in the big leather chair, barely listening as he talked through legalese and estate details. "She spoke highly of you," he said gently. "Said you were the strongest person she knew." I nodded, throat too tight to answer. Then he slid a folder across the desk. "She left everything to you." I blinked. "Everything?" He nodded. "The house, the bookstore, all her assets, and a journal." He handed me an old notebook, the leather soft and worn. I opened to a page marked with a ribbon. "My darling Lex, I hope you never forget who you are, not what your mother tried to mold you into, but the real you. This inheritance is more than money. It's your freedom. Use it to build something no one can steal. And remember, sometimes snakes trap themselves. Just be patient. Love always." Grandma Ellie tears burned down my cheeks. My hands trembled as I shut the book. That's when Zoe walked in. slipping into the chair beside me. You okay? I shook my head. No, but I will be. That night, as I sat on my porch with the journal in my lap, something inside me clicked. This wasn't just about grief or betrayal. It was war. She took everything, but she left fingerprints, receipts, IP addresses. That stupid seafood dinner she bragged about on her Instagram story. I looked over at Zoe, who was scrolling on her phone. You remember what Grandma used to say about snakes? She smirked. Wait until they slither into the trap? Exactly. The next day, I called Benjamin. Tell Marilyn's lawyer I might be open to a discussion about the inheritance. Drop a hint. Nothing more. You want her to come back? No, I said, gripping the journal tighter. I want her to think she's winning. Zoe turned from the window, a slow smile spreading across her face. Oh, hell yes, she whispered. It's payback season. When Marilyn stepped off that plane, I wasn't sure if she'd be wearing guilt or glam. Turns out she chose glam. Bright red lipstick, oversized sunglasses, a matching designer bag, and that fake air of humility she'd perfected over the years. I watched the airport security footage from my phone. Live streamed thanks to a tech guy. Zoe knew who owed her a favor. Marilyn gave the driver my friend Emmett, posing as a hired car service, a practiced smile, and asked if Alexis would be joining us. Emmett played it cool. She's prepping for the board meeting. Said I should pick you up and get you settled in. Her lips curled slightly. She bought it. Good. Back home, Zoe and I had been prepping for days. Every detail had to be just right. We'd transformed the master bedroom in Grandma Ellie's house into a trap so subtle, so tailored, that Marilyn would walk straight into it thinking she was the one doing the trapping. Expensive-looking jewelry that wasn't real? Check. Documents hinting at hidden investments and secret hotel deals? Check. A laptop filled with dummy spreadsheets and emails suggesting offshore accounts? Definitely check. Every drawer, every device, every surface had hidden surveillance. There wasn't a move she'd make that I wouldn't see. The house still smelled like Grandma's lavender diffuser. I kept it running. Part of me needed to feel her here while I dealt with the woman who drained my life savings and vanished. Zoe stood at the window sipping tea. She's 2 blocks away, she murmured. Ready? I nodded. I wasn't sure if I felt calm or completely numb. Maybe both. The front door opened, and in walked Marilyn, full performance mode. Lex, she said, stretching my name like it hurt to say it. You look strong. I raised an eyebrow. Thanks. Grief does weird things to a person. She blinked, caught off guard by how flat my tone was, but quickly recovered. This house, it still feels like Ellie's spirit is here. She always had such taste. Her eyes swept the room like a cat hunting. When I led her to the master bedroom and opened the door, she actually gasped. Oh, Lex, this is gorgeous. Is this? Yours while you're here, I said smoothly. Thought it would help you feel comfortable while we figure things out. She touched the edge of the velvet chair by the vanity, fingers lingering like she was already mentally packing it into a suitcase. You're being so generous. I'm trying to honor Grandma Ellie's legacy, I replied, keeping my voice steady. Later that night, I watched the footage alone. The moment the bedroom door closed, she got to work. First, she opened the closet, pulling out clothes and checking sizes. Then she tried the safe 3 wrong guesses. After that, she went straight for the laptop. I could see the light from the screen reflecting off her glasses as she scrolled through the fake emails and investment files. She was completely hooked. Her phone came out and she started snapping pictures. I smiled to myself. Hook, line, and lipstick. The next morning, Zoe showed me a forwarded email. She's already sent copies of the fake contracts to someone named Gavin. You know him? Her old lawyer, I muttered. He used to help her hide assets during her second divorce. Zoe whistled. She wastes no time. She thinks this is her big score, I said. But she's playing on a stage we built. That afternoon, Marilyn cornered me in the kitchen with a fresh cup of tea, all warm smiles and sugary manipulation. I've been thinking, Lex, maybe we should go through Ellie's will together. I know she wanted things to stay in the family. I played dumb. Of course. I've asked the attorney to prepare a summary. We can sit down tomorrow. She sipped, satisfied. You know, I'm glad we're reconnecting. Maybe this is a second chance for us. I nodded, meeting her eyes. Maybe. Behind my back, She was already reaching out to potential partners for this imaginary hotel deal. Emmett, who was still pretending to be a neutral driver, overheard a phone call where she promised a guaranteed 25% return within 6 months. Bold, risky, and completely fake. That evening, Zoe joined me in the office where all the feeds from the hidden cameras streamed onto a single screen. "You think she suspects anything?" she asked. I shook my head. "She thinks she's in control. That's her weakness. She believes I'm still the girl she could gaslight and manipulate." Zoe leaned back. She has no idea who she's messing with now. 2 days later, she scheduled a lunch meeting with 3 supposed investors at a trendy restaurant downtown. She thought I didn't know. But I was already there, seated at a corner booth with Zoe and Emmett. Our phones were set to record. Marilyn strutted in like she owned the building, sat at the table with her fake documents and started pitching. She talked big numbers, timelines, equity shares, everything she stole from the laptop files she thought were real. I let her go on for 15 minutes. Then I walked over and sat down right beside her. "Hi, Mom," I said loud enough for the whole table to hear. Her face froze, eyes flicking to the documents, then back to me. "Lex, what are you doing here?" One of the investors looked confused. "You two know each other?" I smiled. "She's my mother, or at least she was, until she drained my bank accounts and fled the country." I slid my phone across the table, the screen showing the footage of her opening the safe, reading the files, taking pictures. The men looked stunned. One leaned back, crossing his arms. "Is this a joke?" "Nope," I said, keeping my tone cool. "These documents? All fake. We created them to see what she'd do." And she did exactly what we expected. Marilyn stood up, grabbing the papers. "This is a setup." "No," I said, standing too. "It's justice. The kind you don't see coming." One of the investors snorted. "We're done here." They stood and walked out, shaking their heads. Marilyn turned to me, panic creeping into her eyes. "You planned this?" "Of course I did," I said calmly. "You think Grandma left me everything because she trusted you?" Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. For once, she was speechless. Later that night, she cornered me in the office, hands shaking. "You set me up," she whispered. "I let you," I corrected. "There's a difference." She slumped into the chair across from me. "I was going to pay you back." I stared at her for a long moment. "You always say that. You never do." Silence stretched between us like a crack in glass. Finally, I pulled out an envelope. One-way ticket to a town in Oregon. Quiet, remote. Job offer, modest apartment, 7 months rent paid. "Take it, or I send the video footage to every investor you ever conned, and I file charges. Your call." Her face twisted, like she couldn't decide whether to cry or scream. "You're really sending me away." I shrugged. "You walked away from me first. Now, I'm just finishing the job." She reached for the envelope, then paused. "And if I take it, you get a chance. Not a clean slate, but a path. No more scams, no more lies." She swallowed hard and nodded once. "I'll go." I didn't thank her. Just stood and held the door open. Good. After she left, Zoe and I sat on the porch. She handed me a glass of wine. "How do you feel?" "Lighter," I said honestly. Like I finally stopped waiting for her to change. Zoe looked at me for a long second. "What now?" I pulled out a second envelope from my coat pocket. "We start something new, a restitution fund, to pay back every person she scammed, quietly, without her name. Just closure." Zoe smiled and raised her glass. "To fresh starts, yours, not hers." I nodded and clinked her glass with mine. For the first time in years, I felt like I had control not just over my money, or the family drama, but over my story. I thought sending her away would be the end of it. I imagined myself walking out of that office, brushing off the dust of old pain like it was nothing more than lint. But grief doesn't leave you that clean. It doesn't let go just because you won. And even though she was gone, her echo clung to every corner of the house. At night, I'd catch myself listening for footsteps, expecting drama to walk through the front door in heels. It never did, but the feeling stayed. Zoe noticed it too. "You keep checking over your shoulder," she said one morning, handing me coffee on the porch. "What are you afraid of?" I didn't answer right away. Not because I didn't know, but because it was the kind of truth you don't say out loud unless you're ready to hear it. I wasn't afraid she'd come back. I was afraid I'd never stop being the person she left behind. Work helped. The hotel chain Grandma Ellie built was far more complex than I expected. I had stepped into something massive, with staff across multiple cities and properties in various stages of renovation, all under her name. And now, mine. I dove into it like it was a lifeboat. Meetings, strategy calls, rebranding sessions that gave me purpose, a rhythm I could trust. I started spending more time with the senior staff, learning how my grandmother ran things. She was meticulous, sharp, and somehow still generous. People respected her, not just because she had money, but because she knew how to make you feel seen. That was the part I wanted to carry forward. Not the empire, the heart behind it. One afternoon, while sorting through Ellie's old office in the flagship hotel, I found a small locked drawer in her desk. The key was taped underneath the bottom drawer, exactly where you'd expect someone like her to hide it. Inside were letters, dozens of them, all addressed to me, none of them sent. Some dated back to when I was in high school, one from the year I dropped out of college, another from the time I moved into that shoebox apartment and didn't tell anyone where I'd gone. She'd always known, always cared, and she'd been watching, waiting, loving from a distance while I tried to survive a mother who didn't know what love looked like. I sat there reading them for hours, my fingers numb, eyes blurry. In one, Ellie wrote, "I know you're trying to fix things with your mom, and I support your hope, even though I don't share it. Just don't forget you have choices. Not every door that opens deserves to be walked through." Those letters reminded me of something I hadn't felt in a long time: belonging. Not the kind tied to blood or guilt, but the quiet kind. The kind that says, you're not alone, even when it feels like you are. That night, I went home and pulled out the journal she'd left me. I started writing in the blank pages at the back. Not for revenge, not for records, just from myself. A letter to her, telling her everything. How I felt after Marilyn left. How it felt to win but still ache. How scared I was that I'd always carry my mother's shadow, even while standing in Ellie's light. I wrote until my hand cramped, and when I was done, I felt different. Not fixed, just steadier. The restitution fund Zoe and I started was gaining traction. We launched it quietly through one of the foundation arms Ellie had created years ago. No press, no headlines. Just quiet payments made to people who'd been scammed by my mother over the years. There were more than we expected. Victims in different states. People who'd invested in fake ventures or lent money that never came back. We created an anonymous system where they could submit claims, and our team reviewed everything with care. Some were real, some weren't. We verified, then paid. Slowly, one envelope at a time. Zoe said, "You know you don't have to do this. No one would blame you if you just moved on." But I couldn't. Not when the damage had my last name on it. At the same time, something else started to shift. I began to make real connections with the staff, the managers, even with some of the vendors. Not the polite surface-level kind, but actual conversations. People started calling me Ellie's girl, in a tone that sounded more like respect than pity. I didn't correct them. In many ways, I was. I took Ellie's vision and added to it. We opened a training program for women recovering from financial abuse, hiring them into admin and customer service roles across the hotels. We started a quiet scholarship fund focused on women in unstable homes, kids trying to get out and up. People noticed. Not on a viral level, but in the spaces that mattered: word of mouth, gratitude, progress. Still, Marilyn wasn't completely gone. She sent postcards. The first one arrived 3 weeks after she landed in Oregon. It had a picture of a forest and a handwritten note that said, "It's quiet here, sometimes too quiet, but I'm trying." I didn't respond. The second one was more raw. "Got a job at a bakery, I burn everything. The manager says I'm stubborn. I think you get that from me." I almost laughed at that one. She'd always twisted facts to make herself the hero or the victim. Never in between. Then came the third one. "I met someone. Not like that. A woman named Cheryl. She's blunt and kind. Told me I remind her of her sister who disappeared into addiction. It made me think about you, about the things I never said. I'm not asking for forgiveness. Just hoping you keep the door cracked." I stared at that one for a long time. I wasn't ready to reply, but I didn't throw it away either. Zoe noticed me reading it one night while we were reviewing applications for the new scholarship. "Another postcard?" I nodded. She didn't press. She just passed me a glass of wine and said, Some people only get better after they lose everything. I held the glass in my hand, thinking about that. Maybe that was true. Maybe Marilyn was trying, for the first time in her life, without leverage or manipulation. But even if she was, I knew my healing wasn't tied to her growth anymore. I had built something without her. A life, a mission, a home. One cold morning, I went back to the old house for the first time in weeks. I walked through the quiet rooms, letting memories pass over me like wind. I ended up in the master bedroom, the same room where we set the trap. It looked different now, less like a stage, more like a memory. I sat at the vanity and looked at myself in the mirror. For the first time in a long time, I didn't see a daughter trying to earn something. I saw a woman who had built something on her own terms, who had faced down the storm and made something better from the wreckage. When I walked back out onto the porch, Zoe was waiting in the car. She rolled down the window. "You good?" I nodded, pulling my coat tighter. "Yeah, I think I am," she smiled. "Then let's go. You've got a foundation to launch, boss lady." And just like that, we drove off into a future that finally felt like mine. Life was finally moving forward. Not fast, not flashy, but steady, like a river finding its shape again after a flood. The foundation was growing faster than I expected. We had our first batch of scholarship recipients confirmed, and the restitution program had helped nearly 30 families reclaim what they'd lost to one of Maryland's old cons. People were beginning to talk not about her, not about Ellie, but about the work we were doing. About the hotels that hired survivors. About the woman who didn't take credit for change but made space for it. I didn't need a spotlight. I just needed to know it mattered. And it did. At least it felt like it did until the email landed in my inbox. At first I thought it was spam. The subject line was vague, urgent inquiry about Oregon activity. But the name in the sender line stopped me cold. Gavin Reed, Maryland's old attorney. The same man who helped her vanish. The same man who, according to Zoe's deep dives, had a long record of helping clients evade legal trouble and financial liabilities. I opened the message with a quiet breath. "Lex, I understand this may be unwelcome, but I'm reaching out on behalf of your mother. She has recently been involved in a situation that could become public and legally complicated. She insists she's innocent and claims she was trying to help someone. The full story is messy, and I believe it's in everyone's best interest that we speak before it escalates further. Please call me as soon as you can, Gavin." The first read the message 3 times, then let the silence sit. Zoe leaned in from across the table. "That face," she said, "is either disgust or murder, possibly both." I pushed the laptop toward her. She read the message and groaned. "Tell me this isn't her dragging us back in." I didn't say anything. Because deep down, I knew that's exactly what it was. And what scared me wasn't the mess, it was how quickly my chest tightened, how fast that old guilt climbed back up like it had never left. I thought I was done cleaning up after her, but now I wasn't sure if I'd ever really stop. I didn't call Gavin back that day. I spent the evening walking around the property of our newest hotel in Portland. It used to be a rundown motel. Now, after months of renovation, it was turning into a space that didn't just house guests, it told a story. Each room had art from survivors, donated or commissioned. The staff were mostly women who had been pushed out of the workforce for years and were finally finding their footing again. One of them, a woman named Raina, came up to me while I was standing in the lobby. She smiled nervously and said, "I never thought I'd have a job like this. People usually only saw my record." I looked at her and said, "Then they weren't really looking at you." She teared up. We hugged. That moment, that was what mattered. Not whatever storm was brewing behind Gavin's carefully typed words. Still, curiosity works like a splinter. I couldn't ignore it forever. So the next morning I called. He answered fast, like he'd been waiting. His voice was calm, professional, but tight around the edges. "Lex, thank you for calling. I know this is uncomfortable." I didn't bother with small talk. "What happened?" He sighed. "She was involved with a local woman's shelter volunteering, it seems, helping with outreach. One of the residents filed a complaint. Money went missing. Not much, but enough that questions were raised. The shelter director has ties to a local reporter who's already sniffing around. Marilyn claims she didn't take anything and that she was framed by another volunteer. But Lex," his voice dropped, "she used your name when she applied. Said she was representing the Monroe Foundation." My stomach dropped. "She what?" I know. We're trying to keep it quiet. But if this gets out, it won't just be her reputation that suffers. It could hurt everything you've built. I rubbed my temple, eyes burning. Why would she do that? Gavin hesitated. Honestly, I think she thought she was helping. Or maybe she thought it would make people trust her. Either way, she crossed a line. I was quiet for a long time. Does she know you called me? No. She'd probably lose it if she found out. But I thought you deserved to know. I ended the call and sat there, frozen. Then I texted Zoe. She showed up in 20 minutes with snacks, wine, and that fierce look she gets when she smells chaos. I told her everything. She didn't flinch. So what do? We get ahead of it, I said. We don't let her sink what we've built. Not this time. That night, I drafted a statement. Not about Marilyn specifically, but about the values of the foundation. About transparency. About integrity. About how names mean nothing without action. It wasn't defensive, it was honest. Zoe helped me edit it until it was sharp but kind. We posted it across the foundation's channels. Not flashy, just present. Quiet proof that we saw the storm and were already standing. A few days later, a local paper ran a small piece about the shelter issue. Marilyn's name was buried in the 4th paragraph. My name wasn't mentioned at all. A minor incident, quickly forgotten in the fast news cycle. But it still shook me, because it reminded me that distance wasn't the same as freedom. That healing didn't mean immunity. Marilyn hadn't changed, because I gave her a plane ticket. She hadn't learned because she got caught. She was still herself, just slower, quieter, maybe sadder. But still her. I didn't contact her, but she contacted me. Another postcard. This one had a picture of a small coffee shop and a snow-covered street. Her handwriting looked shakier. I messed up. Again. I told myself I was doing it for the right reasons. But I think I just wanted to feel important. I didn't mean to drag your name into it. I really didn't. I've left the shelter. Found a new job. No one knows me there. I'm trying, Lex. I don't expect forgiveness. Just wanted you to know I'm not running anymore. I folded the card and placed it in the drawer with the others. I didn't cry. I didn't feel anger either. Just a low, deep ache that something in her was still reaching, still desperate to be good, even if she didn't know how. That was the thing about loving someone broken. It was like trying to hug glass. No matter how careful you were, someone always bled. Weeks passed. The scandal didn't grow legs. Our foundation kept moving. I started mentoring one of the scholarship recipients, a 17-year-old girl named Ivy. She reminded me of myself, at that age quiet, sharp, always watching. One afternoon after a workshop, she pulled me aside. Why do you do this? She asked. Because I didn't have anyone doing it for me, I answered. She nodded slowly, like she understood more than she was letting on. Do you think people can change? I didn't answer right away. I think people can try. And sometimes they get it right. Sometimes they don't. But what matters is what you do when you realize you've been wrong. That night, I opened my journal. The one Ellie gave me. I flipped past the pages I'd already filled and started writing again. Not about Marilyn. Not this time. About the foundation. About Ivy. About what it meant to build something from broken pieces and still have it stand. I wasn't writing for closure anymore. I was writing because I finally had something worth remembering. Not revenge. Not pain. Just progress. There's a specific kind of quiet that happens after a storm. Not the peaceful kind, but the heavy silence that settles when you realize some damage can't be undone. That's how it felt weeks after the Oregon situation faded into obscurity. No headlines, no police, just rumors. Still, that silence made space for reflection, and in it, I started to feel something shift, not in the world around me, but inside. I wasn't just holding distance from Marilyn anymore. I was holding questions. What would it take to finally let go of the version of her I kept hoping she'd become? The version who apologized the right way. The one who showed up clean, whole, redeemed. She existed only in my imagination. A mirage I chased every time she said, "I'm trying," and I chose to believe it. But that woman wasn't real. And the one who was real? She'd built a life on guilt, charm, and second chances that always turned into cycles. I didn't respond to the latest postcard. I didn't tear it up either. I just let it exist. Proof of a person still chasing something even she didn't understand. Meanwhile, the foundation kept growing. The third property we renovated had just opened. Ivy had started her college applications. One of our restitution recipients sent us a handwritten letter that simply said, "You didn't owe me anything. That's why it meant everything." I pinned it to the board in my office, a quiet reminder that sometimes healing is just making space for someone else's dignity. Then came the letter. Not from Marilyn, from a lawyer in her new town. It was formal, dense, and full of carefully chosen phrases. Apparently, Marilyn had listed the Monroe Foundation as a character witness in a small claims case involving a dispute with a landlord. She'd never told us, never asked permission. The lawyer wanted confirmation of her volunteer service and ongoing philanthropic involvement. The audacity was almost laughable. Almost. I forwarded it to Gavin. Within an hour, he called, apologetic but exhausted. I warned her. She said she didn't want to bother you. Claimed she just needed to borrow your credibility to get some stability. She doesn't get it, Lex. She thinks reputation is like perfume. You just spray it on someone else and it covers everything. I didn't laugh. I was too tired. Tell her not to use my name again. Not for anything. Ever. I will, he said. But she's spiraling. You should know that. She's not doing well. I hung up before he could ask for anything more. That night, I sat on the back porch, wrapped in a blanket, staring out at the trees as they bent in the wind. Zoe sat next to me, quiet as ever. Eventually, she said, "You've already done more than most people would. You don't owe her a lifeline." "I know," I said, and I meant it. But knowing and feeling aren't the same. She passed me a mug of tea and rested her head against my shoulder. "You don't have to save her, Lex. Just don't let her sink you while she's drowning." The next day, I packed a bag and flew to Oregon. I didn't tell her I was coming. I needed to see it for myself, not for her, but for me. To finally bury the version of Marilyn I kept chasing. Her new town was small, the kind where everyone knows each other but minds their business. I found the cafe Gavin mentioned in one of his updates. She wasn't there. A woman behind the counter looked up as I walked in. "Can I help you?" I hesitated. "I'm looking for Marilyn." She blinked, surprised. She quit last week. Said she had some legal stuff to deal with. I thanked her and left, not sure what I expected to find. I walked around town for a while, through streets that felt borrowed from another time quiet. Cracked sidewalks, overgrown lawns, hand-painted signs in store windows. Eventually, I found the apartment. A sad little building that leaned slightly to the right. Her name was on the buzzer. I pressed it. No answer. I waited. 10 minutes. 15. Then the door opened behind me. It was her. She froze when she saw me. No makeup. No mask. Just Marilyn. Her hair pulled back loosely, hands gripping a plastic grocery bag like it might shield her from the moment. "Lex," she whispered. I didn't smile. "Can we talk?" She nodded and led me upstairs in silence. Her apartment was small. One room, a mattress on the floor, a chipped table, a few dishes. It was clean but hollow. Like someone trying to prove they deserved to be here. She offered me tea. I declined. We sat across from each other like strangers, with too much history to pretend otherwise. "Why are you here?" she asked finally. I looked at her, really looked, because I needed to see who you are when there's nothing left to steal. She flinched, but didn't argue. I never meant to use the foundation. She stopped, hands trembling. I thought if people saw I was connected to something good, they'd treat me better. I didn't think it would hurt you. You didn't think, I said softly. That's always the problem. She looked away. I keep trying, Lex. I wake up and I think, today I'll be better. But by noon, I've already made a mess. And by night, I hate myself all over again. Her voice cracked, the first real break I'd heard in a long time. I don't know how to fix this. I don't even know who I am without the lies. I wanted to scream. I wanted to say, then why keep doing it? Why drag me back again and again when I've spent years climbing out of the pit you made? But I didn't. Because in that moment, she didn't look like a villain. She looked like a woman who never learned how to live without chaos. And maybe that was the real tragedy. I reached into my bag and pulled out an envelope. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Inside was a letter, typed and signed. A legal declaration. It stated that the Monroe Foundation held no association, past or present, with Marilyn Monroe, that any misrepresentation would result in formal legal action. She read it, her eyes filling with tears. "You're cutting me off." I didn't blink. "No, I'm cutting myself free." She nodded, slowly, painfully. "Do you think I'll ever get it right?" I stood. "I don't know. That's not mine to answer anymore." I walked toward the door. Before I left, I turned back. "But I hope, for your sake, you stop waiting for someone to save you." I left without looking back. On the flight home, I didn't cry. I didn't feel triumphant either. Just clear. I had finally stopped fighting for a mother who only knew how to survive by taking. And I was done being a casualty of her survival. When I landed, Zoe picked me up. She didn't ask how it went. She just handed me a sandwich and turned up the music. That night, we toasted with cheap wine and curled up on the couch like sisters who'd built their own house from ash and grit. I opened my journal again, flipped to a blank page, and wrote 4 words in the middle: "I am finally free." There's a strange stillness that comes when you finally stop carrying someone else's weight. It's not relief in the way you expect, not a burst of joy or victory. It's quiet, like the first moment after a long storm when the rain stops and you realize your shoulders aren't tense anymore. That was the morning I woke up after the Oregon trip. No phone buzzing with crisis, no drafts of statements to manage fallout. Just sunlight coming in through the kitchen window and the smell of Zoe's coffee already brewed. She greeted me with a simple nod, the kind that says, "I know," without needing to ask. We didn't talk about Marilyn. We didn't need to. That part was over. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for the other shoe to drop. The foundation was thriving. Applications were pouring in, not because we advertised, but because people were talking about the hotels that hired single mothers with eviction records, about the job program that didn't ask for explanations, just effort, about the scholarships that didn't require essays about trauma to prove someone deserved help. I hired a small team to handle logistics, but I stayed involved in the interviews. I needed to meet them, the women who'd been told no so many times they forgot how to ask. Ivy got into her top choice school with a full ride. She sent me a voice note, crying and laughing at the same time, saying, "You gave me a way out." I listened to it 3 times before saving it in a folder labeled proof, because that's what this was. Proof that we could turn broken pieces into blueprints. One weekend, Zoe and I flew to Chicago to scout a property, a rundown bed and breakfast that smelled like pipe rust and lost ambition. I walked through the hallways, touching the chipped banisters, picturing it filled with warmth and laughter. I saw more than a building. I saw possibility. I saw a place where someone could start over without shame. We bought it 2 weeks later. The same week, we finalized our first round of Survivor-led training workshops. Raina, who used to flinch when spoken to too loudly, was now leading onboarding for new hires. She texted me a photo of herself holding a binder with the Monroe Foundation logo. Her caption read, "I look like someone I would have been scared of a year ago. Thank you for showing me I could become her." I stared at that picture until tears blurred my vision. Then I added it to the proof folder, right beside Ivy's message. I hadn't heard from Marilyn since Oregon. No postcards, no calls, no accidental mentions. Gavin sent one final update: she'd moved again. This time to a town on the border of Utah. Working part-time at a bookstore. Quiet, keeping her head down. He didn't know why she moved. He didn't ask. Neither did I. I didn't feel anger. Just a distant kind of compassion for someone who finally realized they couldn't follow me anymore. Not because I blocked the path, but because I stopped lighting it for her. Spring came fast that year. The trees around Grandma Ellie's old house bloomed soft and slow, like they remembered what peace felt like. I spent a weekend there alone. No cameras, no plans. Just me, the journal, and the porch where I used to watch storms roll in. I reread some of Ellie's letters, the ones she never sent, the ones filled with the kind of love that doesn't need an audience. There was one line I kept circling back to. "Freedom isn't always loud, Lex. Sometimes it's just the quiet certainty that you don't owe anyone your silence anymore." That line stayed with me as I stood in her garden, barefoot in the damp grass, thinking about the girl I used to be. The one who lived with one eye open, always preparing for impact. She was gone now. Not erased, just evolved. Zoe came by the next morning. She brought pastries and a new business proposal, something about turning the second floor of the Chicago property into a co-working space for young women launching startups. She was already building pitch decks in her head. I just smiled and said, "You know you don't actually work here, right?" She grinned and said, "Someone's got to keep you interesting." She always did. Later that day, we took a walk down by the lake and talked about everything except the past. That was the difference now. The past wasn't gone, but it wasn't steering anymore. It was just part of the map, not the road ahead. By the end of the month, we had finalized a partnership with a national nonprofit focused on financial literacy for women. They wanted to merge efforts. I almost said no, but then I thought about how often women like me, like Ivy, like Raina, like even Marilyn got left behind because no one thought they'd understand numbers or balance or budgets. So I said yes. We called it Project Ledger. It launched quietly, with local meetups in coffee shops and libraries. No press, just purpose. The first session had 9 women. The second had 23. The third was standing room only. One of the instructors said, "It's not just about money. It's about giving them the language to name their lives again." That was it. That was the mission. Months passed. Seasons turned. The foundation's work became rhythm, not chaos. Every week, I met someone new who reminded me why this mattered. And then one day, in a hotel lobby in Denver, a woman walked up to me holding one of our welcome kits. Her name tag read Elena. She looked nervous. She said, "Are you the one who started all this?" I hesitated, then nodded. She took a breath and said, "My sister was one of the first restitution cases. She passed away last year, but before she did, she said you helped her feel human again. She told me to find you, just to say thank you." I stood there, stunned, unsure what to say. Eventually, I just hugged her. We didn't need words. Some moments don't. That night, I returned to my hotel room and opened my journal. The last page. I stared at it for a long time before writing anything. Then I wrote slowly, one sentence at a time. "I am not a product of her damage. I am the architect of what comes next." I closed the book gently and placed it in my bag. It was time to start a new one. Years from now, maybe someone will ask how it all began. Maybe they'll expect a dramatic answer, some big bang of betrayal and revenge. But the truth is, it didn't start with loss. It started with a question. Who do I want to be when I'm no longer defined by what they did to me? That question shaped everything that followed. Not vengeance, not validation, just clarity. And if someone else finds this story one day looking for permission to walk away, to begin again, to build a life without apology, I hope they know they don't need permission. They just need to begin. Because healing isn't a finish line, it's a direction. And I'm still walking. Story 2 with my buddies. I'm excited to have a great time on a vacation. It's all because of your credit card. James phoned me all of a sudden. He has been coming home late lately, appearing apprehensive about our house and having covert phone calls with Sandra. I began to question whether he had been preparing something covert. All this time, I suspected Sandra and James were planning something together. Luckily, I was prepared for anything they had in store. Perhaps I should pretend to be surprised. "By yours, what do you mean?" I wanted an explanation, so I asked. James was going on a trip today, and I already knew that. To be honest, I think it's incredible that he believes he can fool me. I wish he had given his idea more careful consideration. So far, I've been patient with everything. Nevertheless, I feel compelled to do retribution now. I've always had a vengeance scheme in the works. We need to confront James and his sister. I think that by the end of today, after all of our patience, things will begin to make sense. I hope they have a great trip without realizing I have someone working behind the scenes. I'm Kelly Brook, and I'm 36 years old. After high school, I immediately started working and moved into a house with my husband, James. I've obtained many certifications in my organization because of my experience and a reference from my supervisor. A strong track record, and these credentials are very important. I was the youngest person in my organization to ever be promoted to a lead role, so it was quite an accomplishment when I was around 23. It's a significant issue to me, even though it's only a leadership post. My hidden ambition has always been to move up the corporate ladder and eventually become at least a department head. James was one of the newcomers the organization accepted over time. I was younger than him, but I was in a higher position at work. It was my responsibility to train James and 3 other new hires, for a total of 3 trainees. We're around the same age, aren't we, Kelly? You're a supervisor already, too. That's incredible, said James, looking surprised. I may be a year or so younger, yes, Since I made the decision to graduate early from high school, I have been employed here. I've gained a lot of experience from it, I said. My early professional concentration appeared to please James. He used to compliment me a lot back then. James eventually started to express interest in me, and despite my initial reluctance, I eventually found myself falling in love with him. After going out to eat and taking drives together, our relationship took a typical turn, and finally we made the decision to move in together. I became aware of James's less careful behaviors when we were living together. I reasoned that it may be his way of being genuine with me and demonstrating trust. I made an effort not to be very bothered by it. James eventually asked me to marry him, and I said yes. After that, we sat down to discuss our shared future. I wish you were a stay-at-home mom. James recommended, you may take care of the house while I work and earn money. It's the perfect arrangement. In addition, I want us to get married, purchase a house, and have children soon. My plan is to get married first, then purchase a house, and finally have children. Kelly, what are your thoughts? James, it sounds like a great strategy. I replied that while I don't really care about the chronology, we should consider our financial status, particularly in relation to our savings. I also don't intend to resign from my position, despite having children. We could set up more flexible work schedules. If we choose to purchase a home, my only concern is how we would handle our finances. Yeah, James said, I know that. However, I find it annoying that you make more money than I do. Nevertheless, I still envision us owning our own home. My goal was for us to purchase a home as soon as we were married. That might be challenging. I mentioned that I already earn more than you, James, giving a clue of the difficulties that lie ahead. For the time being, let's concentrate on planning our wedding and purchasing a home. We may decide what to do and consider having children later. About my work. Then. Okay, let's go with that strategy. James concurred. I secretly hoped to stay in my position, but in order to maintain equilibrium, I put out this notion. If not, I worry that James will continue to place demands on me eternally. Both of our families attended the celebration we hosted during our engagement. I first met Sandra, James's sister, at our wedding since she was traveling. Without knocking, she stormed into the bride and groom's preparation area. Smiling, he said, "Size me up. James has made this decision." "Oh, I'm Sandra, your new sister-in-law?" He's a little more straightforward than his ex-partners. For the record, I'm rather direct with my family. My name is Kelly. "Nice to meet you," I said, a little surprised by her audacity. I was rather taken aback by Sandra's direct introduction, and she waved dismissively before departing the room. Indeed, my new sister-in-law was quite the character. In contrast, Sandra's husband, whom I later met, seemed like a sensible individual. Our wedding ceremony went off without a hitch and was lovely. After James and I finally bought the house we both adored, things appeared to be going by quickly, which motivated me to put even more effort into my career. The doorbell rang one day when I was occupied. James was asked to respond. He smiled and laughed back at Sandra, who had chosen to stop by without warning. "Kelly, hey, check out James's enormous home. I think that's excellent for him. He is, after all, my younger brother." Sandra made herself at home and said, "I have been working diligently. You are welcome to settle in. Are there any snacks or anything, Kelly? Let's hurry, my sister is here." James's behavior seemed strange to me, and I couldn't get rid of it. In the presence of his sister, he appeared to exaggerate, behaving as though he was the only owner of our home. It was obvious that he most likely gave her the impression that he purchased the property by himself. My contributions to the down payment and ongoing mortgage payments for our home were substantial. James insisted on having just his name in the title, though, and I finally gave in to his demands. I reasoned that living together would make it irrelevant whose name appeared on the deed, but I didn't like the way James boasted about it to his sister. Nevertheless, I decided to remain silent and not make a scene. Snacks are here. It's true that James works hard. I said in passing that I was attempting to level the playing field. Why does Kelly seem so confident? With a note of irritation in her voice, Sandra said, "She's not the boss or anything. Actually, James works for me as his boss." I explained, rather taken aback. "Oh, is that correct? When I started working for the firm, did James not notify you?" Kelly began working immediately after graduating from high school. Thus, she was already a manager. That's precisely how it occurred, Sandra thought. I would have easily outperformed her if it had been up to me. Hold on. You graduated early from high school. Despite your seeming responsibility, you lack my level of accomplishment, Sandra asked rather sarcastically. Is anything wrong? Only because I didn't complete my high school education? I answered, attempting to maintain harmony. No, not at all. However, Kelly, since I'm your sister-in-law and you don't have a high school diploma, I can ask you anything, right? The rule is that Sandra made a joke, but it seemed like she wasn't quite serious. Kelly, my sister gets what she wants. I'll have to ask you to leave the house if you don't comply, James continued, as if to support his sister's ludicrous assertion. Their discussion confused me. Given that she is my sister-in-law and lacks a high school certificate, why would she have the right to make demands of me and threaten to expel me from my own house if I didn't comply? Was this a strange prank of any kind? I forced a courteous grin and hurried back to the kitchen, wanting some time to gather my thoughts. I could still hear James and his sister conversing from there, and their conversation seemed sincere. Sandra joined me into the kitchen a little while later. Actually, Kelly, I have a favor to ask of you. What is it? Already dreading the request, I inquired. I have to take out a loan. As if it were a little request, she continued. Like $5,000, please. How is that a negligible sum? That's a lot. For what purpose do you even need it? I asked, attempting to understand the circumstances. It's only $5,000, so hurry up. You work as a supervisor, correct? Your pay must be good, Sandra pushed. The entire conversation felt unreal, and I wondered how we'd come to this point, even though I assumed my financial status would easily handle her request. Sandra needed the funds in order to pay for the upgrades. She dismissed my reminder that she had lately boasted about her new condo. Did I? Just give me the cash, please. James instructed me to ask you and said he would lend it to me. What? Why would he decide that without first talking to me? James made an assumption that surprised me. Listen, Kelly, I'll phone your job right now and inform them that you're leaving. Or you can give me the money. What will it be? Sandra placed me in a difficult situation. Okay, Sandra, I'll give you the loan. But, I said, there's a catch. We have a promissory note to draft. What? Despite the fact that we are family. Sandra seemed taken aback. Indeed. I would like it in writing. Therefore, bring a legitimate ID with a photo when you arrive to pick up the money. All right? You. What a pain. Okay, however, I'll come over tomorrow night if you're handing me the cash. Sandra grudgingly consented, even though it would be inconvenient. I was aware that obtaining Sandra's consent in writing was essential. Despite complaining, she kept her word and provided everything needed the following day. I became acutely aware of James's reliance on his sister during this crisis. To be honest, it was ridiculous. Regardless of what I said, apparently it would have had no effect. After the initial loan, Sandra began requesting additional money without feeling guilty, and I later learned that she had spent the money on expensive goods. She borrowed almost $12,000 from me in less than a month, after I insisted on a promissory note each time. My employer called me out of the blue, just when everything seemed too much to handle. My promotion from supervisor to department manager was their goal. I was overjoyed. My goal of becoming the top manager was one step closer, thanks to this, excited to spread the wonderful news. James had taken the day off, so I hurried home to see him. I've returned home. James, you know what? I made an announcement. Welcome back. Kelly, you seem quite happy. What is going on? Today, James met me. I was summoned in by my employer. And you know what? I accepted his offer to become the department manager. Being the top manager has always been my ambition, so I'm thrilled to be getting closer to it. How? Hold on, what? You're getting promoted, Kelly. James's response highlights a day full of discovery and reaffirms my dedication to my work ambitions among the family stress. It is surprising, with a tinge of incredulity. I don't get it. Have you truly accepted the promotion? James inquired, obviously perplexed. I did accept it, yes. I think I've already told you about my job aspirations, I answered, taken aback by his response. Hold on a second. You ought to have consulted me before taking such a step. What were you contemplating? In addition, I've always stated that I wanted you to be a housewife. How come I'm stuck in the same place and you're going up? That seems strange, doesn't it? James asked, his tone showing frustration. I'm not in charge of that. I have stated that I have no intention of quitting my job. I'm not able to explain why you haven't been promoted. I responded, refusing to back down. James called shortly after our conversation, most likely to his sister, who arrived a short while later. I've heard that you took advantage of the promotion. James should have had that. What provides? She immediately accused me. Nothing was snatched by me. Promotions in our organization are given out according to an employee's performance. Calmly, I explained. You're saying that James does a good job at his job? How could you despise your own spouse? Sandra retorted, rephrasing what I had said. This is ridiculous. They took my bank card straight out of my purse and decided to celebrate at my expense. So I muttered under my breath. I tried to resist, but they were too strong, and they left the house with a final laugh. My eyes welled up with tears when I recognized how grave my marriage to James had been. I was overcome with regrets, but I knew exactly what I had to do. Locate a trustworthy divorce attorney. James was at work the next day and didn't come home that evening. He came over to me looking arrogant. It was a lot of fun yesterday. A feast that has been paid for by someone else is the best. I appreciate you covering it. He handed me the receipt from a high-end barbecue place, showing a charge of $1,500, along with receipts from luxury bars amounting to a staggering $9,000. I was fuming inside, but bit my tongue as more colleagues arrived on my way home. I checked my bank account and was horrified to discover a total of $9,000 had been withdrawn. I confronted James as soon as I saw him. James, what on earth were you thinking? Spending $9,000 in fancy meals and bars, no less. That money was mine. Saved from before we were together, I exclaimed, barely containing my anger over his reckless spending and disregard for our financial well-being. As soon as I walked through the door, James started complaining about me nagging him. When I brought up the issue of the money he had spent, money I had saved before we got married, he dismissively said, I don't know, and I don't care. It's already spent anyway, and locked himself in the bathroom. That was the last straw for me. I decided then and there that I was going to divorce him. Over the weekend, I visited a lawyer, and in the weeks following, the preparations for our divorce moved along smoothly. James's behavior hadn't improved. He continued to come home late and rushed out early on his days off. Just when I was considering hiring a detective to see what he was up to, I received a call from Ryan, my brother-in-law. Hello, is this Kelly? Ryan's voice came through the phone. Yes, Ryan. It's unusual to hear from you. What is going on? I replied, surprised by his call. Well, it's been a while. I'm actually calling to ask if Sandra is with you. He said, no, Sandra is here. Why do you ask? I was curious. She's been coming home late and disappearing on weekends without telling me where she's going. She mentioned she was at James's place when I asked her yesterday. Ryan explained. That's interesting. James has been acting similarly. They might be going somewhere together, but frankly, it's no longer my concern. I shared, distancing myself from the situation. Oh, and Ryan, there's something I need to tell you too, I continued, sensing an opportunity to share my experiences. Ryan was taken aback by my indifference, but urged me to continue. I told him everything about the money Sandra had borrowed from me, James's extravagant spending, and my decision to divorce James. Hearing all this, Ryan sighed deeply. Is that so? I'm sorry about my wife. I've been at my wit's end thinking about divorce, but haven't been able to take that step, he confessed. Ryan, why don't you use the evidence I've gathered? It sounds like we're both dealing with similar issues. Maybe it's time to teach these reckless siblings a lesson they won't forget, I offered, feeling a tie of mutual understanding growing between us. Yeah, let's work on this together, Ryan agreed, a sense of resolve in his voice. Then he suggested something fascinating. Sandra had been pushing him to take a long trip, and he had spotted travel brochures on their vanity. Curious, I went to check a shelf in our house that James usually kept off bounds. To my shock, I found trip brochures and membership cards stashed there. It all made clear now. They were organizing a vacation without us knowing. Ryan, I think they're certainly planning a trip. I recently found evidence of that. I informed him, both of us recognizing the depth of our partner's lying. This discovered information strengthened our resolve to proceed with our plans for divorce and hold them accountable for their conduct. I discovered some trip brochures tucked away, generating an idea as I communicated my plan with Ryan over the phone. Laughing uncontrollably, he consented to comply. We agreed to use text messages to coordinate our activities as we ended the call. Additionally, I sent him some material that might help him in his own divorce process. As we carefully considered our next course of action, James departed our home 3 weeks later, right before sunrise, a plot I knew about since Ryan had alerted me the day before. James boasted to me over the phone a few hours into his excursion that he and Sandra and their pals would be going on a trip with my credit card. I was already suspicious that they were planning something because of his late nights and cryptic phone conversations. Luckily, I pretended to be surprised so I was prepared for their shenanigans. I smirked at him as I urged him to elaborate. According to James, they had been preparing for this trip for a while and saw Ryan as a backup plan in case things didn't work out. They decided it was time to discipline me, since they felt I was growing too self-assured. According to him, James's remarks were intended to denigrate me by implying that I was incapable of resisting their tactics, but I was too upset and furious to care. I didn't feel anything. I asked James about his previous remark about my fiddling with the debit card and his delusions of winning. Bewildered, I gently told James that my card was still in my wallet despite his insistence that he had stolen it. After a little pause, he stammered, wondering which card he had boasted about using. He was shocked when I told him that he had unintentionally taken one of my old gym membership cards. It was the same size and color as my debit card. When James verified that the card did indeed state Fitness Club, he realized his error and started to wonder if he had misread the cards. Ryan, who had been hearing in on speakerphone, couldn't help but laugh amid this uncertainty. James's ambitious scheme to spend money on me had fallen apart due to a straightforward error involving a gym card. In addition to thwarting their grandiose plan, this blunder signaled the start of their retaliation. Ryan and I are prepared to proceed with our intentions, which have been reinforced by the ridiculous sympathy for their error. Although James said he had seen his debit card, his scheme had failed. "So, this was your plan, and Sandra's." Realizing he had been outwitted, he moaned, "I'm really let down. In fact, I replaced your debit card with a gym membership card last night. It appears that you simply took off with it this morning without bothering to check. I came out relishing the development." What? What are you trying to do?" James was obviously annoyed. "No, that's what I should ask you. You're my stepbrother, but don't get ahead of yourself. It's a tough break. You understand?" I retorted, refusing to be intimidated by him. James attempted to dismiss it. "You'll see. When we get back, we'll have presents for you both. Do you believe you can buy us off? Only cash will be accepted." He bluffed. "We'll investigate that. Anticipate it." I ignored his remark and concentrated on the current circumstance. "What will you do at this point? Can you send us some cash, Kelly?" At last, James inquired, his voice shifting. That's where I hung up. His post-call message. Ryan's attempt to scare me by involving him was met with indifference. Before I went back to sleep, did I say that? There were so many missed calls and texts on my phone when I got up in the afternoon. After phoning Ryan, I chose to answer James's call. "Hey, send the money at last, please. It's freezing." "We're gonna freeze, I believe." James begged. It was obvious why they were uncomfortable. They were in Alaska in February. The cold there is biting, and if James and his group were complaining, it meant my plan had worked perfectly. "Really? You stated Ryan would assist, right? Or is he not there?" I played along. "What? Are you aware of anything?" James was clearly confused. "Shall I tell you? Ryan and I agreed to work together since you and Sandra did." "It's pretty easy," I said, relishing the irony of the circumstance. "Is it clear to you now why I kept you on the phone for so long on that initial call? The purpose was to purchase time. Ryan, too. He's taken another aircraft back here." James appeared to be very affected by the information. Far from the opulent retreat they had hoped for, our well-coordinated reaction to their plan had left them trapped in the cold. In addition to stopping their scheme, I was pleased with Ryan and myself for standing together against their dishonesty. I concluded the call with a direct message to James as soon as I got confirmation that Ryan had boarded his trip home. "We've teamed up to provide you a lesson. Now, navigate back on your own. See you." I hung up after saying that. I'm eager for Ryan to come back. In order to schedule our last meeting on the divorce before James and his friends could return, I used this time to call my lawyer. When they returned, I expected the confrontation and wanted to be ready. As expected, James and his crew showed up a few hours later, full of outrage. "What the devil, Kelly? You had best be prepared to go. Hasn't Ryan taken your side? What makes you come back before us? This is not possible. Do you believe this is acceptable to me? Now apologize. Close it and take a seat." Ryan stepped in. James and his companion were ordered to sit by his normally quiet voice, which was now booming. Right away, they obeyed, startled into quiet by Ryan's command. Without any delay, our lawyer handed James and his companion his business cards, which they received with a bewildered expression. Without more delay, Ryan and I handed them a pile of documents. As they perused the documents, their complexions drained of color, their bewilderment gave way to shock. "Hold on, this discusses property division. One take it that you're not advocating for a divorce?" James stumbled, his tone tinted with skepticism. "It's also available online. Divorce? What exactly did I do? Surely this must be a joke." James's skepticism was shared by his pal, looking for confirmation from one to the other. "Yes, exactly," Ryan said in a decisive tone. "I'm going home. I'm done. You made the call during your alleged vacation, and I've been recording your daily outbursts ever since. James, I take it that you don't see the issue with your actions?" "I can't continue to live this way." "Hold on, are you serious?" As the reality of upcoming divorces started to set in, James's voice was tinted with a sudden understanding of how serious the situation was. The roles had completely reversed, and Ryan and I were standing side by side, prepared to leave the mayhem they had caused behind. "Didn't I mention it earlier? I want back the money you saved when I was single, as well as half of the down payment we placed on the house and the remaining mortgage balance." I told James exactly what I wanted. I turned to Sandra and said, "You're going to pay me back for the money you borrowed and the extra amounts you took out from my savings with James, aren't you?" Sandra made an effort to deflect. "Hold on. The house was purchased by James, and I never borrowed or used any of that money." "Sandra, you are falsely accusing me. Kindly go over the materials. The precise amount you owe is detailed on a promissory note." Undeterred, I made the point. "No, I have no knowledge about this. Without evidence," she said, trying to minimize the gravity of the facts. "I'll just dismiss this as useless." Sandra and James both responded hastily. With arrogant expressions of defiance, Sandra tore the paper to pieces, and James smashed the recorder with his foot. "James, take a look. Nothing changes if you destroy that recorder. My PC still has the info saved. And it wasn't the original document, Sandra, that you destroyed," I gently explained. "You've accomplished nothing, exposing their efforts as fuel. What on earth are the three of you attempting to accomplish?" James was clearly frustrated. My straightforward response to Sandra was, "Whoops," emphasizing their lack of forethought. "Not to add the comfortable time you had with that guy at the bar. I have a claim against you for all the money you wasted." I went on to expose more of their wrongdoings, confronting them with the consequences of their acts and the law. Sandra and James both began to sob, tears running down their cheeks. James had to face a painful but just financial reckoning. The sum was $135,000 in all, $15,000 for other expenditures, $100,000 for the down payment on the house, and $8 for emotional harm. There was also an impending $4,000 debt repayment. Sandra's bill totaled $35,000, which comprised $31,000 for the loan she had accepted with a promissory note and $11 for other expenditures. Given Sandra's deliberate anxiety and unnecessary expenditure, Ryan's claims against her totaled $135, $80,000 for various costs, and $55,000 for emotional damages were determined without splitting any assets, such as condos. This glaring financial and psychological cost highlighted the repercussions of their behavior and served as a powerful reminder of responsibility and the need of honesty in interpersonal interactions. Given their history, I half expected James and Sandra to try to sue us after the repercussions. Our sharp lawyer, however, had previously foreseen such actions and included a provision in the settlement documents that basically said that if you attempt to sue, you will undoubtedly lose. It will simply cost you more since no one will stand up for you. Instead, concentrate on your repayments. With it, we were able to completely avoid going to court. After gathering my belongings, I departed from our shared residence. James was moved to a different branch when word of the entire situation somehow made its way to my employment, which helped create the required space between us. Shortly thereafter, I received an unexpected message from James. "I miss you, Kelly. Life is meaningless without you. Could we try again? You may devote all of your attention to your career." However, I was wise enough to avoid resuming that pattern. It will not take place. "Goodbye," I said firmly. Sandra then arrived, attempting to use the family card. "Think it over, Kelly, about my brother. What if we all move back in together? Perhaps we simply misinterpreted one another. I believe there is room for improvement." I was equally determined to respond to her. "It will not happen, Sandra. I apologize. Farewell." Despite their entreaties, I refused to back down and ended all communication. It turns out that Ryan too got similar appeals, but decided to disregard them. I once saw a for sale sign outside my former home while driving by it in a cab. I had no idea how James and Sandra were doing, and I didn't want to know, because the settlement had been paid in full and all communication had been cut off. In my case, I've advanced and moved on. Literally. I moved into my new life after purchasing an apartment. I just received a promotion to regional director, a position I had long desired, and my work has been amazing. I've also become closer to Ryan, discovering compatibility and comfort in one another's presence. We've gone out a couple times and found that our encounters are surprisingly easy. After the divorce, life has significantly improved, verifying that I made the correct choice. What has transpired between Ryan and me is a story for another day.